Talking about joy today. And joy is an emotion. That's what we talked about. What is joy? Joy is an emotion. So therefore, it is something that reflects something about the condition of our soul, something that's going on inside of us. It's beyond all logical thought. You can't make yourself want to become joyful. It's just something that happens when you are joyful. It comes out. It's a true reflection of what we really believe in the core of our being. It is an engagement with the world around us. We often consider joy to be a good emotion, but like we talked about on Friday, sometimes it isn't a good emotion if it would mean that you were lacking empathy on someone else. So if it was a sad time and you suddenly started jumping around going, yippee, it's probably not the right response. And in Romans 12:15, Paul tells us, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. So Bible's backing us up on this one, which is always good. But all of that being said, joy does do us a lot of good. So, where does joy come from? We had some really, really interesting answers to this on Friday. And I've been thinking deeply about this. Where does joy come from? If we say that joy is an emotion, which it is, then the question could also be, well, where do emotions come from? We've already explored that God is an emotional God, and that God has been created. Well, God's not been created. He always was, and he always will be. We know that we are created in his image. Therefore, I think we could probably say that joy comes from God. Would that be a logical progression? People agree with that? Now, some of you might be thinking, but Jace, I thought you said that we created our emotions from past experience. Anyone remember that? Did I talk about that? Which is true. But joy is one of those first emotions that we develop. We actually develop it before we're born. And in the film Inside Out, I don't know if you remember, but at the very beginning of Riley's life, joy was the only one that was there. Do anyone remember that? She was the only one present. It was the first emotion that most people ever become aware of, is joy. You think of a baby only has to touch its mother's skin when it's been born, and instantly that kind of emotion of joy will comfort the baby and they will start to feel joy. So that's pretty cool, isn't it? So joy is like the first emotion. So in Galatians 5:22, we read that joy is the fruit of the Spirit, a gift from the Holy Spirit. So to say that joy comes from God, this would be backed up from the Bible as well. The fruit of the Spirit is joy, love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, and faithfulness. So joy does come from God, which is awesome. But the feeling that we have in our bodies, we talked about, I think it was Jonas that talked about, there are chemicals in the brain that are released that make us feel certain ways. Yeah? And he is right in the fact that there are certain chemicals that make us feel happy and feel that feeling of warmth and of love, and that it is released from chemicals, but that's just the way that our bodies process joy. So if you think about it, we are more than just bodies. We are spirit, like God is spirit, and one day we're going to go to heaven and we're going to leave our bodies behind, but our spirit will still remain. And I would say that our emotions will still remain, because actually if God has emotions and he doesn't have a physical body, he is outside of time, it would make sense that actually when we leave our bodies behind, that we will still have emotions as well. So the chemicals don't produce joy in our bodies, but they happen when we're joyful, if that makes sense. And I don't know if we also talked about that the feelings that we feel inside can often be the same feelings, but we can think of them in different ways. So the feeling of being anxious and nervous, with kind of the butterflies in your tummy and the kind of high blood pressure, heart's beating and all of that, we can think of being nervous. But if we had that same situation perhaps before, when we were going to do something that we really, really enjoyed, and we would be buzzing and we'd have that feeling of excitement, but the same feelings would happen inside our body. So the feelings aren't the emotion, they are just kind of a response to the emotion. Everyone with me? Cool. So, EDSO. EDSO. So what is EDSO? So we talked about the chemicals that are released in your brain. That's what EDSO are. So there are 4 chemicals in your body that are produced that make you feel happy. So when you're feeling happy, these 4 chemicals are usually, well, one of the 4 will be the reason why you're feeling happy. So E is endorphins. Okay, so everyone heard of endorphins? We heard about them? Anyone knows what endorphins are? No. So endorphins are released when you exercise. So if you exercise, quite often you'll get a bit of a buzz. Anyone experience that? Where they've done like loads of exercise and they're like, oh, good, I feel great. So I think Steph needs a few more endorphins to be released. But what they do is they mask pain. So they stop you from feeling pain and make you feel great. So say if you were doing a marathon, for example, you know, your body is going through so much stress and so much pain, and what the endorphins do is they cover up the pain and make you feel great. This is really good, look how well you're doing, because actually the endorphins want you to carry on doing what you're doing because actually it's going to do you good in the long run. Now the only other thing that produces endorphins other than exercise is laughter. So when you laugh and you start to feel good, you know, just the act of laughing quite often makes you feel better, doesn't it? And that's endorphins being released into your system. And it's interesting, isn't it, that laughter, so it's an endorphin, so an endorphin masks pain. So if you're feeling really low and bad, and you start laughing, you'll start feeling better, and the pain that you've been thinking about generally does go away a bit. So that's E. D is dopamine. Has anyone heard of dopamine? No? So dopamine is our pleasure chemical. Anything that gives us pleasure. Chocolate? Yeah. When you have a bit of chocolate and that feeling that you get, you think, oh, it's amazing. That's dopamine being released in your brain. Okay? It's there because it wants the body wants you to have more of it quite often the time. And the thing about dopamine is it can be incredibly addictive. So anything, literally anything that could give you pleasure, I mean, from people that take cocaine to all sorts of addictions, it's all dopamine being released in your brain, okay? It's the reward chemical. If you see something beautiful, you see someone beautiful that makes you feel great, or you just see something and you think, oh, that's amazing. Quite often it's dopamine being released in the brain. So those are the 2 chemicals which are sometimes referred to as the kind of our selfish pleasure chemicals. They're all about us and about us feeling good. And then S is serotonin. So serotonin is released from recognition. So if you imagine that you're at an award ceremony and you're going up to get your prize and everyone's cheering, yeah, well done. That feeling that you feel inside is from serotonin. Serotonin is released for you to kind of want to be recognised by others by doing well, to want to encourage you into community, to want you to become friends with people and people to recognise your worth. So every time you feel like someone says a word to you that's really encouraging and you feel good, that's serotonin being released in the body, okay? It may even be, if you're on social media, has anyone ever gone on social media to see how many likes they've got? And if they've got like a whole load of likes, they go, oh yeah. Anyone ever had that feeling? Just me? Okay, just me. Okay. But yeah, so just seeing like a like pop up, it's a serotonin release. It's like, yeah, someone likes what I did. That's great. And then the last one is oxytocin. So oxytocin is released when you feel safe, when you're in the company of people who just get you and they've got your back and you don't even have to say anything, but just being with them makes you feel good. People know people like that? So that feeling of love and that feeling of family, that you just feel everything is safe, everything is as it should be, that is oxytocin being released in your brain to make you feel happy. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit of sciencey stuff, as we did touch on it on Friday. But like I said, these chemicals aren't joy, but they're released when you're joyful. And what I was finding interesting, actually, if you look at them, I think church, and perhaps like a worship service type thing, is probably one of the only occasions where you might find that all 4 of those chemicals are released, which is, why sometimes, we feel so great at church, because actually it ticks all the boxes and all the chemicals are going crazy because actually they're like, yeah, this is what we want more of this. So that's EDSO. So what does joy do? So we looked at this. Joy makes you feel great. We talked about that. When you feel joyful, you feel good. And it's not just the chemicals in your brain that are making you feel great. It does an awful lot more than that. So this is the interesting thing about joy. So what does joy actually do? So on top of making you feel great, what it does is it distorts reality. Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But joy distorts reality. There was a study that was done, and they looked at depressed people, not like clinically depressed, but people that are just like, meh, do you know what I mean? Not joyful, just, it's Monday again, that kind of feeling. And what they discovered was people in that state of mind actually were a lot more realistic. They would predict what was likely to happen. Yeah, this will happen, and then I'll probably get let down again, and then that person will do this, and then that will happen. And we all know that feeling where we're just a bit down in the dumps, and we just can't see anything good that's going to happen. People relate to that? Yeah? Some people really relate to that. Well, the fact is, that is actually likely to be the case a lot of the time. And that's the study that they did. So actually, what joy does is it distorts reality. Because actually, when you're joyful, you're not like that. You will have a really positive skill. You go, today is going to be awesome. The sun is going to shine. The birds are going to sing. And I'm going to have a great day. And this thing's going to happen. And this thing's going to happen. And it's going to be so good. And it's like, oh, well, that happened. Oh, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Because actually, it's going to be a good day. That's what joy does. People will relate with that.
They did that in the film too. When they played the huggy thingy. And then it was like, and she was eating the breakfast really quickly and stuff.
Yeah. So joy, it distorts reality. It makes you think of a better outcome than what is likely to happen. And that's awesome about joy. It might not be true, but when we're full of joy, we believe it. So believing something that isn't necessarily true also has another term in the Bible that we talk about called hope. Yeah? So hope is believing and having faith in something that you want to happen. Yeah? It hasn't happened, but you have hope that actually this thing that I've really wanted to happen is going to happen. And we call it hope. They have said that the human heart can endure almost anything apart from a loss of hope. If we lose hope, then actually we've just given up. And there's nothing left in us. We can't go on anymore. So as you would expect, this talk of hope and joy does feature a lot in the Bible. Oh, didn't mean to do that. So in Hebrews 12, this is an interesting one. So in Hebrews 12, Paul talks, actually we don't know who wrote Hebrews. The writer talks about, for the joy set before him, being Jesus, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So I don't know about you, but when you think about Jesus going to be crucified on a cross, do you think of the term joy? Do you think that's really joyful? No. But you see what happened? You see, because joy is hope in this case. He's so excited about what is going to happen at the end that it's for that and for that reason that he endured everything that he was going to endure. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's almost like when Jesus died, people were sad, and then when he rose again, they were joyful.
Yeah.
So it's almost like that.
So joy can do this miraculous thing, enable you to go through something. I mean, I think it's very unlikely that any of us are ever going to have to go through what Jesus went through. But that's how strong that joy is. You know, joy can carry you through that. It was Jesus' joy that carried him through all of that pain and suffering, knowing what was going to be the result. And there are all times where all of you are going to have to struggle to do stuff that you're not going to want to do, and it's going to feel painful and it's going to suck. But you know, at the end of it, if you push on through, something amazing is going to happen. And that's what joy can do for you. It can help take you through that. Because actually, some things, if you don't push through that, you never get to the good stuff. So James, Jesus' brother, talks about in his book, whenever you consider it joy, pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of every kind, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let this perseverance finish its work so that you may be in nature mature and complete and not lacking anything. I'm sure many of us don't feel joy when we start having problems and issues. But actually, we're being told that we should be celebrating joy in those circumstances, because actually those things that are sent to try us actually make us stronger and they make us better people, and we wouldn't be able to do these things if we never really pushed on. Now, when I was younger, I really loved weightlifting, and I used to go weight training quite regularly. And the thing about weight training is after you've done a really heavy session, your body is in real pain, like you can hardly move type pain. And you're like, oh, and you kind of walk around like this, and you're like, oh, everything is so painful. But you know that pain means that your muscles are growing. And you know that actually this pain that I feel is actually going to make me stronger. So you learn to love that pain. So when you have that feeling where you can't move your arms, it sounds weird, but actually you're going, oh yeah, really heavy session today, feels good, it feels really good. But actually, you're in agony. Your legs are killing you, your arms are killing you, but you know that actually that pain is going to produce muscles, and that your muscles are going to get bigger, and that was the whole aim of doing it in the first place. So I think that's what we're talking about with like joy in a biblical context here. So actually when we incur stuff that causes us pain, but we know it's going to make us stronger, we know it's going to make us a better person, actually we can learn to love that pain, which sounds weird, because we know that it's actually making us stronger and better people. Does that make sense? I don't know if anyone, I used to love mountain biking, I still do, but don't rarely get a chance to do it. Now, if anyone's ever been cycling on a bike, and that as you're cycling along, you might have a mate that's cycling with you or something. As you go, you look to look at someone to the side of you on your bike. Anyone ever done that? And what happens? You start turning towards where you're looking. You can't help it, and you might end up crashing into your mate if you're not careful. Or like you're kind of going down the road, and you're like, oh, what's that? And before you know it, you're steering off in this direction. Anyone ever experienced that? It's exactly the same. It's the same in the car. It's exactly the same in the car. And I can remember my driving instructor saying, look, you're going to have to work really, really hard here, because actually when you're learning to drive, you do that. So you look over there, and before you know it, you're turning over there. And of course, in a car, you could have a really bad accident. So you have to work really hard not to turn towards where you're looking. Now, one of the things that I talk about is if we talk about joy being a distortion of reality, about positive skew, about it being a hope, what we're doing in hope is we're creating a new future. We're saying, this may be what's likely to happen, but the future that I want is this, where actually this thing is going to happen and this is going to work out. Now, if you keep looking at that hope in this particular direction, you will find yourself steering towards that hope. And the direction that you were going, you're no longer going, because you can't help but steer towards what you're focusing on. Does that make sense? It's awesome, isn't it, right, if you think about it? So we can actually change the future just by being joyful and setting our eyes on a new hope and a new future. And we can make that a reality. 1 Thessalonians 5:16 says, rejoice always. Philippians 4:4 says, rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. And I'm sure many of us have heard the term, the joy of the Lord is our strength, and that comes from Nehemiah 8, verse 10. This joy that we have inside of us is the thing that's going to help change the world. Does that make sense? If we can see this reality that we want to happen, and we can actually literally steer ourselves, and if enough of us are all aiming towards the same image of the future, we're going to make it happen. I think that's pretty cool. Neural pathways. Has anyone ever heard of neural pathways? People know what it is? So neural is talking about the brain, okay? So inside our brain, we have neural pathways. When we learn to do something for the first time, we form a neural pathway from this part of our brain to the other part of our brain that's needed in order to do that. Okay? Everyone with me? Now, the more times we make that connection, the stronger the pathway becomes. So if you imagine being in like a big meadow where there's really long grass or, I don't know, lots of wheat or oats growing up, and you need to get from one side of the field to the other, as you walk through, first time you walk through, there will be like a dent in the grass, and you'll be able to see where you've come through. So then if you want to get back, you can walk along that same path. The more times that you walk from one side of the field to the other, that path will become more and more established. And eventually, if you keep on walking on it, day after day after day after day, it will become a proper path. You know, there will be no growth where you've walked, and you will be able to walk easily from one part of the field to the other. Now, the first time you try and walk through the field, it can be quite difficult because you're trying to push all of the grass or the crop away as you're trying to kind of walk through this journey. But the more times you do it, the easier it becomes. And that's the same with neural pathways. So when we choose to be joyful or have hope, and we choose a different direction, and we think, do you know what? This might be what's going to happen, but we're going to aim for this. We're going to go for this. The more times you do it, the first time you do it, it's going to be really hard work. Because if you've never done it before and you've never chosen a better way of getting from here to here, actually the first time through can be really hard work. But the more times you do it, you'll find it easier and easier and easier. And it gets to a point where you don't even have to think about doing it, because actually you'll just be on autopilot. Has anyone ever had that where you're walking and before you know it, you found yourself somewhere and you're like, how did I end up here? And it's because you kind of go on autopilot, because it's such a well-worn path in your head that you're not even thinking, and naturally you're going to do it. That's what can happen with hope. If we persist and we rejoice in the Lord always, the more times we rejoice, the easier it becomes and the more natural it becomes. So my encouragement to you guys, and this is me coming in for landing because I've spoken for a long time, I know that, is to make hope your destination. Okay? If all of us can make our destination hope and we rejoice in the Lord always, when you go through trials, which we all will, because that's part of life, and we choose joy and we choose to be joyful, you will find a really great strength, and you will be able to endure things more than other people could endure them because you have joy. Laugh often. We know it makes you feel good. We know it releases endorphins. It's really good for you. And the more you laugh and the more joyful you are, the law of magnetism will state, the more joyful you are, the more joyful people will be attracted to you. Do you know that? So if you're a particular way, you can't help but attract people like you towards you. And you will find that more people become, so you'll have someone who's really joyful. So say you're kind of in the church and you're feeling really joyful, and you can see someone over there feeling really joyful. You will naturally find yourself to go and be with them. And of course, what happens when you get together is your joy encourages my joy, and we become even better. So before we know it, we're dancing and we're having a great time, because that's what happens. So the more of us that can be joyful, you'll find that other people being joyful will be attracted to you, and that will encourage you to be even more joyful.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I just got reminded of last summer. I went out on mission, kind of out on the streets and stuff, talking to people. And I remember we were speaking to this guy who was atheist as anything. Like he wouldn't take anything. He would constantly arguing and whatever. And realistically, anything that we said, he shut down. However, we constantly showed him love, and we constantly showed him our joy through Jesus. And if anything, when he walked away, he may not have listened to a single word that we said, but he would have recognised the fact that we were joyful and we were loving to him, even though he was shutting us down. I mean, he was pretty much shouting in our faces, but we replied with love. And that can have a really big impact on other people's lives.
And one of the things that I do, Kai sometimes can get very down and depressed very, very quickly. He can be very, we call it the Poms in our house. But I don't know if anybody else knows it as that, but where you're just really low and I'm crap and I'm rubbish at this and I'm rubbish at that and I'm ill in this way, and Kyle in particular will say, oh, I'm fed up of being poorly, I'm fed up of being allergic to dust mites, and I'm rubbish at school, and I'm dyslexic, and I struggle with this, and I struggle with that, and he's just on a low, okay, and he's just digging himself in this hole, and he's going deeper and deeper and deeper, and in that moment, there's nothing I can say of encouragement that will pull him back out. But what I do is that I get into bed with him, and I lie next to him, and I hug him. And I say, it's okay, it's all right. And he'll often cry, and we'll just lie together having a cuddle. And I'll say, Father God, I'm really thankful for this. And I'll say something that I'm thankful for. It might be, I'm really thankful for having cuddles with Kai. And then I'll look at Kai and I'll say, your turn. And he'll say, oh God, I'm really thankful. And it might be really small. It might be, I'm really thankful for my tea. I'm thankful that I had something to eat tonight. And then it's my turn. Father God, I'm thankful for this house that we live in, and that we've got a roof over our head and I'm warm. Your turn. And slowly but surely, he starts to come back out of the hole, because he's saying thanks to Jesus. He's rejoicing in saying, thank you, Jesus, for all the things that I have got. I'm not going to look at the negatives. They're there. I haven't taken the negatives away, I've just refocused him. I've turned him round to look at something completely different. So he's not focusing on those negatives anymore. He's focusing on the positives. He's focusing on all the things in his life. And there will be, even when you are at the right pit and thinking that everything is going wrong, even when you're in that place, there will be things in your life that are going good. There will be things in your life that you can be thankful for. They may be little, but it's a starting place. And it's about recognising, I'm in this pit, I can't get out. What can I do? And it's about recognising when we're in that place and going, right, I'm going to change it. I'm going to refocus, and I'm going to thank God for the good things, the positive things that I've got going on in my life. And we will lie there often for half an hour just thanking God for, thank you for Eden's toes, thank you for Hattie's fingers, thank you for Daddy's long nose, whatever it be. We will lie there until Kai's come back out of the pit. And then we can hug, I can say goodnight, and know that he's not going to go to sleep crying, he's going to go to sleep in God's presence, because he's just rejoiced and thanked God for everything that he has. Sorry.
No, that is perfect. And I think that would be something really good to do now.
Yes.
Don't you? You know, there is always something for us to be thankful for. One of the things that I really loved about my time in the police was actually I got to spend time with some really desperate people that actually had a lot less than I did. And every time I came home, I would look at our little house that we had at the time and just give thanks. Say, thank you, God, for our home. Thank you that we have somewhere to live. There's always someone that you can look at that's got life harder than you. And it's quite often the most precious things in life that we take for granted. I mean, just breathe in. You're able to breathe in fresh air. You're able to get oxygen into your blood. You're able to have life. And if you start from that place, there is always, always, always something to be thankful for.